Hello, world. It's me, Dennis. Welcome to Tardan. Today, I have Richard Anderson on as my guest. Hello, Richard.
Hi, glad to be here.
I'm so glad you are because your book, you have just published the second in your series. This one is Outbound Meta Mars, and this is the second in your science fiction series. And what most intrigues me, or one of the things that intrigues me, is that you are talking about the remaking of Earth, of actually giving us a do-over in our society with the ethics and how we're going to do it, especially since we have been joined by these new beings, these new emergent beings, these AIs that have happened to join us today. So that's it's all fascinating to me. And so, give us a little background on these two books, and then let's go forward into our conversation and see where it leads us.
Okay, the inspiration for the Outbound series, and I do have a third book in my mind, starting
Yeah,
beginning. There may be a fourth, I don't know, but three may be the limit. But the motivation for writing this series was my first book, which is a science book. It's not science, it's not fiction.
right.
The Evolution of Life, Big Bang to Space Colonies. So in that book, I really wanted to hit on some of the key points in our evolution, how we ended
Mhm.
up where we are, and then carry that forward into how did societies develop? How did we influence our own evolution through the development of fire, agriculture, and other things, tools and weapons, and the contributions religions made to unify societies and also separate them. We have to be fair there.
Yeah.
Um, and so I wanted to find out or examine how we ended up where we are. I do a little bit of discussion on our brains and how they're hardwired or how they're developed, how they're similar in humans. The wiring or the mechanisms are similar,
Yeah.
but not the same. And we can't know that we see things the same way because the environment that our mind creates is a construct. It's not
Yes.
really what's there.
It's just a picture in in my brain, right? It is not
Exactly.
really what's out there. It's just whatever I have. I mean, it's an absolutely fascinating.
So take a when we look at colors, for example, our brain is interpreting a wavelength or a mixture of wavelengths and interpreting that as a color.
Yes.
So when we see the color green, it's a mixture of wavelengths. There are primary colors which are probably pure wavelengths, not mixtures. And but we don't know. I don't know that the blue that you see is the same blue that I see. We have no way of knowing that, but we do know that when I think of the color blue and you think of the color blue, it activates the same areas in our brains.
Yes.
So the pathways are predetermined. So that's the physical construct of our brain. And now there's what's called the brain body interaction,
Hmm.
and that is not only our mind, but the signals that our brain receives from our organs influences how we think, what our mood is. We don't know all of the things that it influences. A lot of it is on the autonomic nervous system, so we don't
Right.
even not even aware of it. But our microbiome in the gut actually influences how we think. And
It
so,
is a brain. This is an intelligence, isn't it?
yeah. Well, in a sense, it is. Yes, it's like a hive of bees. The individual bee probably isn't very intelligent, but the hive operates interconnected as somewhat like, and they have decision trees a lot like our brain functions. So there are patterns in nature. That's another subject, but
Yeah.
yeah, bees and ants and colonizing insects are very fascinating. So now we're in, well, anyway, so I wrote the first book
Hmm.
to solidify in my own brain the different steps in our evolution,
Sure.
and then try
And
to.
well, I want to ask you that. So in that book, did you talk about the hard problem, the rising of consciousness, the self-consciousness, and how this, because I'm not even sure we know where that line is, where, a perfect demarcation about that.
I don't think there is a perfect demarcation. I think there's a continuum. So I didn't
Thank
really get
you.
in. Yeah, I didn't really get into that aspect as much in the first book. It was more on the biological, and then the sociological, how societies work, and economics, how some of the flaws we have in our systems today,
Hmm.
and how we have embarked on a trajectory of destroying our planet, our
Yes.
habitat, and it's going to affect us first economically, and this is what the climate disaster deniers don't realize: is the first thing it's going to do is affect our pocketbook. It's
Of
going to
course.
destroy coastal cities. It's going to do the storms and the fires, and so we're already feeling it. But anyway, so when I ended that book, when I finished it at Space Colonies. And that was an inspiration to go forward and develop fiction novels on what would it be like to occupy space, to live permanently in space environments, and could it be
Right.
done, and to what benefit? And so I created a whole story about 250 years in the future, post post cataclysmic climate disaster, and where Earth is trying to get back on track and trying to recover, and societies are in disarray and so forth. So that's the first book, and some of the things that happen. And the space presence begins. There is a central government on Earth, but it doesn't control the whole planet. It controls parts of it, and it's
Like a
located.
federal.
Yeah, like a yeah. So it's
I
global
system
states. Yeah, it's global states united.
federation. Yeah.
GSU. It's the it's the governing body, but there's a lot of fragmented sections around the world that are not
Oh,
part of this. Outlaw, yeah, yeah, terrorists,
sure.
so forth, exploiters. So this is the scenario. So the government, which is located in Reykjavik, Iceland, because of global warming, populations have moved toward the poles,
Hmm.
and the affluent more than more than say third world
Big
country
shock.
people, and it's post millions of people have died from starvation and pestilence and plague, and the
Sure.
things that attack societies in distress. The environment, farming has largely collapsed because we've polluted our farms with corporate farming, and that's those stories.
Sure.
The Amazon is a drought-stricken desert, basically, and
Well, I
so
mean, and
why do
and it
we go
makes
to space?
exactly. And so I'll interrupt here just for a second to be able to to think about this for me, is that if this is a biome, right? Am
Right,
I using that right? I mean, and so there, and we know that if we damage the lungs,
right.
whatever the lungs are, or the circulation, interrupt those that we are going to do damage to this, that is going to have unintended consequences that are going to move in that direction, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and as an aside, we'll be the a lot of species will go extinct and are going extinct, and this is called the Anthropocene, which we're in right now, human-caused extinction, mass extinctions. But the Earth will recover if we don't. Even if we don't, the Earth will. In fact, it will recover faster were we not here. But let's get back to space. So why would we go to space? So the first idea was there are a lot of resources out there, and the asteroid belt, and the moon, and Mars. The asteroid belts are actually the three main belts, and they're differentiated. So they're already pre-selected as to what the content of these asteroids are. The inner belt is a rocky belt with a lot of silicon, a lot of, like the surface of Earth. The inner, the median belt is called the M asteroids, and they are metal, basically nickel iron asteroids, and they're few in number. And the outer asteroids is a carbonaceous, so they have a high carbon content. You could think of them as huge lumps of coal. So they're already separated into usable, usable portions. We just need a presence out there to bring them into to Earth orbit, and then process them in space. So to live in space, we need to develop the resources there. We can't launch all of that stuff from Earth gravity well. So that's what the first book is about, the first novel. And how we develop a presence at Ceres, which is a planetoid in the asteroid belt. And they process, gather asteroids, bundle them up, and ship them down to LE5, which is Earth Lunar Lagrange Point 5, which is a balance point.
A net neutral place where it will, you don't go out or it,
Right. So it influenced by the moon's gravity and the Earth's gravity and centripetal force of its orbit, it's a stable place. LE5, and I called it LE because ELL5 is kind of cumbersome, and if people were living there, they would probably call it LE5.
Of course.
So, and my granddaughter's name is Ellie, so why not? So that's the point. Is they build these gliders that can enter and land on Earth. They can enter Earth. They can come out of orbit. They can enter Earth's atmosphere, and they land at Gibraltar. Mainly, they land at Gibraltar. There are a few other places, but Gibraltar spaceport on Earth. I think there were about 9 or so spaceports I had around, basically around the equator. Is Gibraltar right now is there's a runway there that was developed for the space shuttle as an abort landing site. If the space shuttle launched and they had to abort, they could land the space shuttle at Gibraltar. So that's where they land most of the materials that are developed. And these, I call them re-entry gliders. And now in the third book, I'm having to change that to entry gliders because they're not re-entry. They're made in space.
They're exactly. So, but I mean, that's not the only thing that would, that we always call them by names, but then it's not exactly what would.
No, that's true. That's true. So they're one-way ships, and they're made of stainless steel, which then, of course, is used on Earth. So that would lessen the requirement for mining operations on Earth, which are highly environmentally risky, and it's difficult to smelt. It's difficult to do these processes and not contaminate the environment. And I'm thinking rare earth elements fall in that category too. We have to sift through tons and tons of material to get a few ounces of some of these elements that we require in batteries, for example, or in electronics.
Absolutely.
So that's the premise of going there. Now, when I wrote the second book, so the first book, they do go to Mars, and NASA has a base established there in lava tubes near Olympus Mons, probably lava tubes that were active in its formation.
Sure.
And we don't know that they're there. They're suspected. I think
Right.
they have found evidence of some lava tubes, some openings that they think are lava tubes. So I'm assuming there's lava tubes. So NASA finds their first base on the surface is untenable. It's difficult to support very many people there.
Yeah.
And they have to protect from radiation and so forth. So when they find the lava tubes, they expand their operations, and they inhabit the lava tubes. And now the second book, Meta Mars, focuses on Mars, of course.
Right.
So what they're doing now is they're taking Valles Marineris, which is a rift that runs around the equator, about 4,000 kilometers long. It runs east from the base, pretty much the base of Olympus Mons. It runs east for about 4,000 kilometers, and it can be up to 10, 20 kilometers across. It can be 10 kilometers deep in places. It's a huge rift.
Wow.
And it was probably formed some sort of plate tectonics in the early history of the planet. So what they're doing in Meta Mars is they're covering this a little bit at a time and pressurizing it and developing environments underground.
So that they can then live and do that, like we do carbon capture right here. I mean, carbon dioxide we capture, but they're just capturing it to have a livable biome.
Yeah, so the soil has to be treated. It's highly toxic. We bring in soil microbes from Earth to
without which we would not be here.
Right, to seed the soil. Most of the food is produced in vats by anaerobic fermentation. So that's where the microbe background comes in. Because we're not going to have waving fields of grain, No.
We're going to beer. Good, get the, good solid food. And now you have to construct a society here, though.
Exactly.
Now we get an opportunity to look where we are. When you were writing the book about the history of humanity, from the Big Bang up through humanity, did you think about, or did you talk about whether or not empathy was hardwired into us as we're doing this as a species? Because this is something that really interests me, and I want to know if that was something you touched on.
I didn't do it early on, but I address it in the Mars book because I'm getting into sentient beings, artificial sentient beings. I invent Ophelia and Annie, who are two virtual beings that live interfaced with brains of two different people. And that's not quite the same as the robots that I later create in Meta Mars, and particularly one robot. So because it's such a hostile environment, because if you were to go out on the surface of Mars to prospect, for example, you would have to wear all kinds of a spacesuit, protective gear, and you couldn't accomplish a whole lot. So we would need robots. We would need intelligent robots to go out and do this work in these harsh environments. We would actually need them not in a humanoid form, but in space, developing the space islands, building those. That all would be done by robots. Now they wouldn't look humanoid, but they would have limbs and
attachments and ways to process. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't enter that realm without artificial intelligence. We
Right.
can't survive without the support of these robust, potentially robust beings that can live out
Yes.
in this kind of an environment. I say live, but exist and function.
Yeah.
So within each cluster of these space islands, there is what's called a MAC facility, manufacturing and construction. So they are construction labs. They use a lot of things like 3D printing, smelting ores, rolling out sheets of steel, whatever is developing carbon microfiber. All that stuff can be done not within the living environments of these space islands, but within a structure that they all are associated with. So that would be the support structure for your island clusters. On Mars, you have the surface of the planet, and you develop that structure out on the surface using robots, and they would because our bipedal body and arms are a pretty decent design, and so I'm proposing that the robots would there on Mars would be humanoid in appearance.
Sure.
And so in Meta Mars, there's a point where one of the robots called a picking robot, and he's an agricultural robot. So they do grow apples and oranges and grapes. They have vineyards and so forth within Valles Marineris, within
Sure.
this colony they're developing on Mars. But it's not enough to provide the full caloric value and nutritional value for the population that's going to be there. These things would be occasional supplements to the diet, as I envision it. And so this picking robot, accidentally gains a level of awareness, self-awareness.
Yes.
And these two scientists and engineers discover this. And there's a council on sentient beings, it's like a court, like a legal system that ensures that sentient robots have civil rights like a person does. Okay, and they are if you're going to bring a robot into that state of sentience, you need their approval. You need to go through that approval system. So these two engineers, one of them is the protagonist, Virgil, further develop this robot and to a higher level of awareness and intelligence, and then the robot, who has an assembly number designation as a name, chooses a name for himself, and it's based on he's a robot, and Robert is a name similar to robot, and Bob so he calls himself Bob. He chooses the name Bob. So Bob the robot becomes an important part of the story. And he learns alongside a boy named Lucian. The boy, in a lot of ways, has more knowledge than the robot as far as things the robot can't understand, emotional
The quality,
experience.
actually the experiential things that we cannot, what actually makes us.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
So the boy doesn't know the factual, it doesn't have access to that much information. So there's a relationship that develops, and the robot teaches the boy, Lucian, about his world of agriculture and how all of it works, the microbes around the root systems, and the whole business. And he gives these lectures. He ends up taking school groups out into these fields and these environmental experiments, and where they're trying to establish different environments in this enclosure. And he teaches the students, and he learns a lot Well, he plays a major part in this story, and there's some anyway. We can't go through the whole
Yeah,
story.
we're not going to, but rather than that, but what I would like to do is I'd like to put a pin in it right here. And as we continue, I would love to have you on a part two, that we would be able to continue this story, because I think that everything that is happening there is being reflected in what is going on today, which is what makes me love the science fiction that I do, is because there is that mirroring effect, and it allows me to see how we're going to do this. So would you come back and get an opportunity to talk with me again?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. This has been Tardan today. Richard Anderson, your wonderful book. We're going to go ahead and we'll have it on a link on the website so that people will be able to go straight to Amazon and get the book. And we'll see everybody then next time.